Hello, everybody. It is Starrapter here, and I'm joined by Milton and Ben for episode 8 of the Outer Rim Transmission podcast. Yes, you heard that right. This is a podcast. Now, if you guys have been following the channel for a while, I put out 7 episodes of Outer Rim Transmission, and we also had Ben and Milton on one of those episodes, and they were an interview video series, and I finally decided to pull the trigger because I got a lot of feedback. People liked the videos but wanted to see it in a podcast format, so I decided to completely revamp Outer Rim Transmissions, and now we are a weekly Star Wars podcast that will stream approximately around this time every Friday, and we'll have the podcast coming to you guys that following Monday for your travels to work and whatnot for the week. So our whole format is basically going to be, we're going to talk the breeze about what's latest in Star Wars news and whatnot. And then if there's a new episode of something out that week, like this week, we're going to talk about The Bad Batch Season 1, Episode 4 towards the latter end of this podcast. We will talk about that. So we have lots of stuff coming out on Disney Plus all the time. We have Visions coming up. We have Book of Boba Fett. Then going into next year, we have a ton of different Star Wars content. So that is basically what is going to happen. This is going to go. We're going to see what happens. If we get some people in the live chat, we will try to address comments as we go along. But other than that, this is a new venture. I'm really excited about it. I know these guys are just as excited about it as I am, because I think everybody's been kind of on the same page about, I think it's about time we actually do something like this. So I'm going to introduce our guest, or I should say our co-host, actually. I'm used to having them as guests, but co-host here. We're going to introduce everybody to Milton and to Ben. So I have some really fun Star Wars icebreakers planned for this episode, where we're going to just get into the weeds. We're going to get into the fun stuff when it comes to Star Wars, because, hey, there's a lot of drama online, on social media. We're not that place for this. You're going to come here, you're going to watch, or you're going to listen every week, and we're going to try to bring out the fun in Star Wars, because I think that's why we all got involved with Star Wars. So we're going to just start it off by just going around the room here and saying, what was the thing? What was that moment, your earliest memory of Star Wars that you might have thought have gotten you into the franchise? I'll just start off by saying, if you guys have watched the channel, I mentioned I went over to my neighbor's house and watched a little bit of the Jabba's palace scene, and I was both horrified but both really fascinated by the aliens that were all spread out, especially Jabba the Hutt. I think one of the earliest pieces of Star Wars merch I have is a Jabba the Hutt hat, which actually I still have. So it was just something about that. We'll start with Ben, man. Is there an early memory that got you into Star Wars?
Oh yeah, for sure. I would have to say my favorite, or my earliest memory of Star Wars would have to be, I was probably 6, 7 years old, and I was watching Star Wars: A New Hope, of course, and the main thing that really hooked me was seeing Darth Vader walk through the doors, to start that movie. Like, that was such a big moment. Like, I'll never forget that, because as a kid, seeing that character come walking through, and then like we've talked about before on these streams, seeing him pick up the rebel guard and, just throwing him aside and everything, like that whole sequence hooked me to Star Wars. And from that point on, I've been a fan ever since.
Yeah, that moment was really a powerful one, right? Because you just see all these different looking beings. What is this guy in his black costume? These stormtroopers, all these rebel troopers doing their best to hold him out, and it just is futile. Then you see the droids, and you see what's going on with Princess Leia. And it's a great opening to a film, because it just throws you in there. Like, that's what's so great about Star Wars is that original trilogy. George Lucas kind of had this prior stuff with the prequels in the back of his head, I guess, when he was developing it. But it really just throws you in a story. Everybody's on the same playing field, no matter if you're a kid, no matter if you're an adult. You see the Star Destroyer going across that screen, and you're in it. And I think that's what's so great about A New Hope, is it gets you from the beginning and just holds you there all the way till the end.
Oh yeah, for sure. A New Hope, it made such a big impact on me when it comes to being a Star Wars fan. And like I said, I'll just never forget it. And I feel like that movie just, of course, it's easy to say it set the standard for all the movies from that point, but it really did. Like, all the different things throughout that movie that impacted, Star Wars. I feel like one of the biggest moments, even as a kid, that I rewound a few times was Juan was talking to Luke about the Clone Wars and all that. Like, as a kid, I was like, oh man, like trying to get every detail, like hearing, what he was talking about. And again, everyone, we all talk about all these big characters, whether it be Harrison Ford or Mark Hamill or Carrie Fisher or any of the prequels or sequels characters. But I feel like one of the most least talked about characters is Alec Guinness playing Obi-Wan. And his portrayal of Obi-Wan, I feel like, is the strongest acting in that entire movie. And again, it's another big reason that I got really hooked to Star Wars.
Yeah, I would say that Ben Kenobi portrayal is fantastic. And I wasn't he up for an Emmy or something, or not an Emmy, an Oscar or something?
He got nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
Yeah, and I think that's the only time that's ever happened in Star Wars, right? It still hasn't happened to this day, but we've gotten that. Somebody's gotten that kind of accolade for acting in a Star Wars movie. We've had so many awesome acting moments, especially in the Disney era. So many things, Rogue One, all that. I would even give it to Kylo Ren, Adam Driver in a few of those scenes he was in. Just fantastic acting. But oh yeah, definitely. And I'm going to swing it over to you, Milton. Do you have an early memory of Star Wars that really got you hooked?
I would say for me, when I first moved to Shippensburg in Pennsylvania, where I first started living when I got this area, my dad actually, I still have it to this day, Black and Gold Special Edition Star Wars. And the original trilogy. And I remember in no particular series of movies, in that edition, every movie started off with a special feature of the re-ant anniversary of like George Lucas talking about the digital age and how he had to redo the films or clean them up because they're going to lose the negatives, that type of thing. So watching those like first 20 minutes before the movie even started, each one, I was like, oh, this is movie making. I didn't really know much about movie making. And Star Wars got me into thinking about how to make a film and, and like effects and CGI and how it works. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. So that was my first intro to Star Wars because of my dad was watching the special edition Star Wars. I think those particular movies have a special place in my heart because it got me started with Star Wars. I know I bought all the DVDs and different versions of them as they came out, but that particular box set is something that I probably will never let go because it's such a fond memory to me. It got me into my journey of being a Star Wars fan. Till this day, anytime I see the box, I feel good. I'm like, okay, I get Star Wars. It brings back that 10-year-old, Milton that first got to watch Star Wars. I mean, I've heard of Star Wars at the time, but like I didn't really know what it was. I knew what Star Trek was and everything, and Planet of the Apes, but never really into Star Wars. And once I sat down and watched the films with my dad and my brothers, I was like, okay, this is pretty badass. And I was like, all right, Skywalker's that guy. Of course, everyone thought, Darth Vader was the baddest man on the planet. So it was cool, man. And like I said, to this day, that box set, I'll probably never get rid of it. Something very special. Hopefully someday if I have children, I can pass it along to them and say, hey, this is how your dad got started with Star Wars.
Yeah, that's awesome. I still have that VHS set. I have the original one as well. But that was my heyday, was the original trilogy, was going in to see those movies in the theater. I remember walking out from one of the special editions with my aunt at nighttime. I don't know why I remember that. I must have been saying something profound when I was like 7 years old or something. Anyway, but what you also said about the family with the generations of Star Wars, I think that is a huge thing that a lot of franchises don't really have, which is why Star Wars has stayed around for so long, is the generational impact that it has over, families watching this and all that, right? Like my mother, she took me all around town to get the episode 1 promotional items from like the Pizza Huts and the Taco Bells and the KFC. And then we went to see the movies. So I have a lot of memories of my mother going to see the movies and everything like that with me. So that's a really big, important thing, obviously. And yeah, you mentioned Luke Skywalker and these epic heroes that everybody would just talk about on the playground. Everybody would just reenact. And you were talking about with the filmmaking, as that is such a big thing for, I mean, even like people like my father, who doesn't even really care about Star Wars, he likes to watch the behind the scenes stuff because he just finds that so fascinating, because it really is like magic that they're making. And the amount of innovation and amount of inspiration that Star Wars gives to people in their creative minds as young kids. Like I would always be reenacting reenacting scenes or creating new ones out of my own head with the action figures. You know, after you watch the movie, you can live on with the action figures. And that was a huge, big momentum push from Lucasfilm putting out the merchandise, and George Lucas really like putting that forward more than any other franchise at the time had done, and it really paid off huge.
Oh, no doubt. And like I said, it's just stuff like that. I think, just to continue like my journey on Star Wars. At that time, I wasn't much of a reader, as a kid at that time. I was like, whatever, books are stupid. Let me just watch movies and whatnot and play video games and action figures. But Star Wars is probably, and I can probably say, honestly, got true. Star Wars got me reading, because I remember one of the first books that I ever read in Star Wars. I'm actually looking at it right now on my phone. I just remembered it. It was a Jedi Apprentice series.
Oh yeah.
It was whenever Obi-Wan Kenobi was an apprentice, and Qui-Gon. I actually remember that book like yesterday. Because if you haven't read it, Qui-Gon Jinn's first introduced to young Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan's kind of like an outcast to his other Jedi classmates, and Obi-Wan's reluctant, or Qui-Gon's reluctant to take him on as an apprentice because of his previous apprentice, like someone either dying or to the dark side. Again, I have to read them again. There's like 20 books. And I remember reading that first book, and it's called The Rising Force. Because the cover's badass, because Obi-Wan like hovering a lightsaber in front of him, just like focusing on the Force. I'm thinking, wow, like that'd be kind of dope to be a Jedi. And that's when I fell in love with the books. Until this day, I have most of the audiobooks. I listen to them all the time. Some of the radio dramas. So like I said, like Star Wars for me helped push me into a new, I guess, envelope of just thinking and freeing my mind up, seeing the world differently. So I think that's what Star Wars does for a lot of people when they first get introduced to it. Whether you love it or not, it just makes you think a little differently, see things a little differently. It's a good thing.
Yeah, Ben, do you have any stories like that about, as you were growing up with Star Wars, did it kind of steer you in a certain direction of interest, or like he said, anything that kind of got you thinking differently?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said earlier, Chris, you're reenacting things with the figures or whatever. Like I remember when I was younger, with some of my cousins, one of our relatives had a diving board, so we always tried to reenact like Luke diving board thing, and then flop up the diving board because we couldn't pull ourselves back up. So that type of those type of little stunts, and then as you said, Milton, when I was in elementary school, that Obi-Wan series was huge, actually, because that was my loophole when we had to do when I was in like fifth grade or whatever, fourth, fifth, probably fifth, sixth grade, I had to do different like we had to do book reports like every couple of weeks or something. So and it was choose your own book. So my loophole around that was like, okay, I'm just going to do one of these books every single week.
Oh my gosh.
Every single one of my book reports was just a progression of those book series.
Wow.
And even my teacher remember asking me, and they were like, she was like, "Are you just doing all these books in this series?" And I was pretty much like, "Yeah."
Well, there's 20. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. There's 20. That book series was great. As I said, Milton, Qui-Gon's apprentice goes to the dark side. Obi-Wan, one of the most iconic moments, like this is a side tangent, but one of the most iconic moments in that book series that still stands out to me is when Qui-Gon's telling Obi-Wan, like, hey, you need to come with me, you can't stay here with this girl, and Obi-Wan draws his lightsaber on him, like he's ready to fight him, and Qui-Gon's like, are you really wanting to like do this? And Obi-Wan thinks about it and then puts his lightsaber away and runs off. Just like a little moment like that stuck out to me so much as a fifth, sixth grader, because I was like, man, we just watched Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon in episode 1, and then you have Obi-Wan drawing his lightsaber on Qui-Gon like potentially a few years before this. Like it was, that type of thing really stuck with me when I was younger. And then of course getting into all the books like as I got a little bit older into like 7th, 8th grade, reading the bigger novels like all the whole Yuz and Vong series, all that stuff.
Fire. See, I never read any of that.
Oh, that series is great, and that's a whole different podcast, a theory for another day about potentially how that could eventually be incorporated in Star Wars.
Yeah, Chris, you don't want me talking about the books and why Disney. This is my only beef about Disney right now is that they should have used all that material that they have available to them. But again, that's probably for another podcast.
Yep. But along with that, I would say like one of the other. I feel like one of the biggest in terms of book reading when I was younger that impacted me. That of course has impacted like just about any Star Wars fan that I would say is probably in their 20s or older is the Thrawn trilogy. Like that trilogy. That book trilogy has impacted me more than anything just because it was like wow.
Yeah.
This really sets that table for what books should be, in my opinion. Because it was like you were reading 3 movies. It was basically like you were reading another trilogy, like another movie trilogy. They were written so well. It was just so impressive, just the way everything played out in those books. And, if any of you haven't read those books, for sure they're not canon, but they're still amazing books. And to me, that really matters in terms of of course, Star Wars memories and things like that. And then, just being a kid, like some of the other memories, of course, some of the biggest things were getting all the different figures and all the different lightsabers and all kinds of stuff like that. Like those are some of the biggest things growing up as well.
You're not wrong, Ben. I mean, and Chris, I'm sure you'll get into your memories on like the action figures, but I just know when I was a kid, like seeing. I feel like in the '90s, every like commercial, like because you know how Toys R Us was all that back in the day. I swear to God, I feel like Toys R Us was like running a new Star Wars commercial and toys every other week. So I remember there was the big Death Stars you open up and new vehicles. Because that was around the time. I think in the late 90s when they were talking about doing the prequels, was that's around the time of the legacy of the Force, or the Power series of the Star Wars figures. And I actually still see those like once a month because I go to this once a month I go to this vintage toy collection show like 20 minutes away from my house.
Oh, cool.
And, I mean these guys do sell like the Power of the Force Star Wars figures. And then the episode 1 brand.
Yep.
I mean, dude, trust me. When I walk through this place, every time I see them, I legit almost bought Millennium Falcon like 3 weeks before it got out. Not even. And the guy I had there, he's like, "Oh, it's $3. I'll throw on a Han Solo with it." Oh, man, I know I should get this. Seriously, next time I'm going to take pictures to show you guys. I swear, it is fire.
One of the fondest memories I have, and it's a thing of the past and of ancient times, is you would get the Star Wars Insider magazine, and I don't know, you would do something with these like postage stamps or something like that, these little cutout things, and you would send them in, and then like months later, because that's how slow everything was back then, they would give you an action figure. And I remember the first one that my neighbor Mike got was a Han Solo that you could take the like in Stormtrooper gear. You could take the helmet off. It was Han Solo, and it was a mail away, and it was like, oh my god, that was like the first like memory of a Star Wars action figure. Like we were over his house, he's like, I got this really cool action figure. I was like, how'd you get that? Oh, you have to mail it away. Like that was so crazy.
Well, now talking about figures, to ask you guys both of you guys about it. Now, do you remember for Star Wars Episode 1, it was such a great marketing ploy by Lucasfilm at the time. They had this comlink like Qui-Gon used in Episode 1, where each figure would come with a little comlink scanner, it was literally like a, like a flash drive almost, I guess I would describe it. And you would scan it on the comlink thing, and it would be like Qui-Gon talking, or it would be Yoda talking, or it would be whatever character. They would have all these characters' voices recorded on this little comlink thing. And I remember that as a kid, I was like, man, I gotta collect all these things. And we were up in the attic, I don't know, a few months ago. And in one of our codes up there, I have all those little comlink USB chips or flash drive chips, like on a big like a chain, like a necklace, like all of them. I was like, oh man, I can't believe this is still up here.
I think I remember the chain. I think that was an official thing, I believe.
Oh, was that a thing?
Yeah, you might be right on that.
That was one of the earliest toys I remember. I was like, man, this is so cool being able to like, hear the same lines from the movies repeated.
Yeah. And the first episode 1 figure that I got either was a battle droid that I had to mail away on the STAP, or it was Mace Windu with a blue lightsaber. Because remember, this is before we even seen him in episode 2. So episode 1, he never takes his lightsaber out. So they were just like, oh, let's just give him a blue lightsaber like everybody else. So I think that's funny.
Yeah. So I remember like, well, you remember in episode 1 where the one scene at the end of episode 1 where they're meeting with the Palpatine and all them at Boo. They have the fake Mace Windu guy, which is ridiculous. And his super hill is nothing like the one he has episode 2 and 3. Speaking of podcasts, Chris, we're going to do a commentary of the movies eventually because I have a lot to say about the movies we're watching. Just saying.
Oh man, that's the deal. All right.
But like the figures, man, I tell you what, like. I really feel like, Star Wars has done a really good job over the, was it been 40 years of Star Wars, maybe, what it is. Like they've done a really good job at marketing their merchandising, a really good job at really connecting multiple generations through their merchandising, whether it's with toys, books, radio dramas. People don't talk about them enough because those radio dramas back in the 80s and 90s were so fire, and I still listen to them. But like, I don't know, man. George Lucas, I mean, he struck gold. I mean, I don't really know. I can't even describe how a generation like that, like something that's made in 1977, still lives on till this day, and it's even more popular. Now I think Star Wars is a little cynical and fickle at times because of social media and fandom, but it still has enough shelf life to continue going for another 100 years.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like Star Wars is just a never-ending legacy. I mean, and you guys caught me. I was kind of laughing when how many times you said merchandising. It was giving me Spaceballs flashbacks to merchandising. But yeah, Star Wars is a legacy. I feel like that can go on forever because as you mentioned earlier, Chris, sure, real world families, but Star Wars is forming a lot of families through the fandom. We've all become really good friends. We talk almost daily. And so many people became good friends across the internet, at conventions, at comic book shops, at Toys R Us when they were still in business or wherever. Like Star Wars is such a wide-scoping property. It literally affects every generation from young to old.
Yeah. It's like you said, say what you will. I said earlier in the episode, what you will about the Twitter and all that stuff and Facebook. But you go to events like Star Wars Celebration, you go to like the midnight release of the toys at like Toys R Us they used to have that I went to a couple here in New Jersey before they shut Toys R Us down, unfortunately. And you'll never sense that kind of stuff you would online. Like the fandom, when you're with cool people, is like the best place to be. It is so welcoming. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody just has that aura around them, or it's like, yeah, I love that part too about that. Or I like, you could spend like, an hour talking about this one video game, or like another hour talking about this book. Like there's so much in Star Wars that is so immersive, and it just affects everything. Every facet of entertainment now has something with Star Wars. Now we're going to be talking about TV shows. We had no idea there was going to be Star Wars TV shows back in 2000 2003 when Revenge of the Sith ended, So, or 2005, I should say, right? Yeah, 2005 when Revenge of the Sith. We thought it was done. Star Wars is over. And we're very far from that. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like, I think we all knew that Star Wars could potentially go on after Episode 3, but I think because the books had such good, rich ideas that we're thinking, okay, what was the next chapter? Especially with Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Leia. But like I said, I think now with Disney taking over, and I've said this even in the episode from before, Chris, that we had way back when, that Disney, they know how to expand the brand. They know how to push something in a proper way, especially when they have the right people involved. I think what's been going on in the last, let's say 3 years, I think fans have been jaded because they feel like Disney has forgotten what Star Wars was all about originally.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, they still know about the marketing. They still know how to campaign for sure. I think that people are now wanting to go back to, okay, tell some rich stories, get us feeling like 10 again.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that's what they're doing though now.
Yeah, for sure.
They're really going in that direction with all these different TV shows. Like we have the final season of Clone Wars, and then Bad Batch now, and Mando, and hopefully all the other upcoming shows turn out to be great, which I don't see why they shouldn't be. So I think it's going in that direction, and it's great because sure, we may have there may be some like qualms here and there about certain aspects of Star Wars, but the good thing is at least there will be a section of the audience that views these certain properties that we may or may not like, as their original trilogies or their prequels or their sequels or whatever. I mean, heck, I remember, when I first saw episode 1, 2, and 3, I loved those 3 movies, loved them because, I was, when I was like 6 or 7 and then probably like 9 and then like 12 or so, or however old. Anyways, I was in that age range, loved all of those movies. And again, I was the target demographic for George Lucas because that was his demographic, like the 12, 13, 14, that age range. And I never really heard the discourse and like the backlash, funnily enough, like until I was older, until I was probably 15 or 16. And then so many people were like, oh, Jar Jar. And I was like, what? I started looking into it and I was like, oh, so this is what people are saying and used to say. So, it's just, a lot of people will, have such varying opinions like that. But again, it'll just be like based on where and how you were introduced into the Star Wars franchise. And that's why, like, I'm always trying to like put on like a positive spin towards Star Wars as best I can, because, you never know when someone new could be getting introduced to Star Wars. Like this could be potentially someone's first piece of Star Wars content they ever see is this video or podcast. Like, so I don't know. Star Wars is such a wide scoping thing. It just impacts so many people.
Yeah, so we did have a little bit of a technical difficulty, but it looks like that got fixed. So might have to fix that in the post or cut out some of that. But thanks for letting us know, Christopher, because we could have honestly gone the whole show doing that. That would have been really bad. All right. So this is what happens when we're podcasting for the first time. Things happen, and we will evolve over time, hopefully.
Right. It's live, so let's go.
So we talked about books, we talked about action figures. Let's talk a little bit about video games, because that's the main thing that brought me into Star Wars. Was even after the movies ended, there was no shortage of games you could play. The first one I really remembered were those classic Super Nintendo ones, and on the N64 I played the hell out of Shadows of the Empire and started collecting all the Dash Rendar merchandise, and I don't care what anybody says, I'm still waiting for that guy to get back in canon. And it goes all the way back to the latest games, like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. One of the best Star Wars stories in my opinion, and that's comparing it to the movies and the TV series. So Star Wars really has expanded and extended its longevity thanks to the game. So Is there any games you guys want to just list off the top of your head that have really kind of gripped you and kept you going?
I'll start with this one. So actually, I think it was 2 weeks ago. I was talking to my brother. I was like, "Hey, I'm going down to Hagerstown, which is Hagerstown's Maryland's like 30 minutes away from where I live ish. And there's a place down there called Second and Charles. It's like a gaming place, comic book place, whatever. And they had Shadows of the Empire there. They had Super Star Wars on Super Nintendo. Yep. It was like $50, and I'm like, holy shit! Like I should buy it, but I didn't do it. I would say my favorite Super Nintendo game for Star Wars was probably Super Empire. Oh, because that game was hard.
Those caves, I've never beaten that game.
Yeah, I've beaten them. I've beaten that game plenty of times, but it's hard.
Man.
And then I'd say for PlayStation or PlayStation 2, I would say the original Battlefront was so good. So good. And then PlayStation 3 would be the Force Unleashed games. N64, you got to go with Rogue Squadron or Shadows of the Empire. And I just played Shadows of the Empire a couple weeks ago, and that game is still hard. Still hard, dude. Like I'm not even kidding you. Like it's downstairs on my 64. Oh my gosh. I beat the first level, which is the Hoth.
Hoth.
When you drive in the thing.
The Wampas are coming out after you.
Yeah, it took me like an hour, and I was like, "Holy crap, man!" Like, I forgot how tough this game is, and like, the controls are different, but it's a challenge. But I really enjoy it. Like, Dash, you're right. Dash Rendar needs to be canon. Like, I don't know anyone like. They need to stop playing. Like, but those games, man, are so fire. Like, I think I will say LucasArts, man, was so dope back in the day. Like no one could tell. No one's alive today that when they played those games could tell you, oh, Star Wars made poop games back in the day. No, they didn't. Every game that came out, and we all can speak to this, every game that came out back in the 90s and mid to early 2000s by LucasArts was so good. Like everyone wasn't a bust. I don't know which game was bad. I know. There might have been one or two in there. Chris, you're laughing. You're probably right. There's probably one or two in there, but I don't remember many compared to now.
Yeah.
So all of them I played, I was like, oh yeah, this is good. Star Wars, I can't complain. Like they always knew how. But you know why? Because they all told different stories that grab the fans. You're like, oh wait, this is what happened post Jedi. This is what happened in between. And what was happening during Empire Strikes Back. People don't realize that Shadows of the Empire is going on during Empire, like that particular movie. So it's like this is an alternative way of seeing what other characters were doing. That was probably our first glimpse of games expanding the universe.
Another one that really just blew open the doors on the universe is your brother Christopher Weber. He's saying KOTOR for short. Yeah, I don't know how I could ever mention Star Wars video games without saying that because
he's right. He's right. Chris ain't wrong. Knights of the Old Republic was fire too. He knows that because when we were kids, we played the original one on Xbox, and that game was a challenge at first. I wasn't a really big fan of number 2, but yeah, the first one was so good.
Yeah, because, I mean, we're going back 4,000 years in the past. Before that, every other game connected you to the original trilogy or the prequels. And then they're like, oh, there's stuff outside of the saga. You can go back 4,000 years and see this huge war between the Sith and the Jedi, which maybe a book or two might have acknowledged that, but to actually see it come onto the screen itself and you actually be able to make a character and interact in full RPG mode, like, it's amazing. And then they spun that off into Star Wars The Old Republic MMO, which I still dabble in to this day. That's been going on for well over 10 years at this point, and it's just a really fun sandbox game to get in, make a character, hang out with friends, do some activities, things like that. But yeah, Ben, how about with you, man? What are some games that kind of pique your interest with Star Wars? I know you like Battlefront.
Yep. I'll start out though with I'll just do a quick little rundown of some of my highlight games. I would say, for starters, definitely the Super Star Wars games on like NES and everything. Like that was always a lot of fun. Like as you said, Chris, extremely hard though. Like I never beat those games. And then on the 64, of course, Shadows of the Empire. That game's still amazing. And again, as we all said, Dash Rendar. He should be in canon. I mean, the Outrider is kind of in A New Hope, like the special edition or whatever. There's that, and then for the PlayStation 1, I was a really big fan of. There was this game. It was like called. I don't know. It was pretty much Mortal Kombat Star Wars is what it was. Like
Oh, Masters of Terras Kasi.
Say it again.
Masters of Terras Kasi.
Yes,
that was one of the bad Star Wars games.
Yeah, see, I had a lot of fun with that game. Just
I hated
friends.
That game.
just battling friends in that game back and forth. I always thought that was a lot of fun. And then for PS2, I think one of the most least talked about game is Star Wars Bounty Hunter, where you're Jango Fett.
Oh, yeah.
That game was so much fun because, again, you talk about Star Wars, whether it's the Lucas era or Disney era or whatever, they make good trailers. You can still look up the trailer right now for Bounty Hunter, and it is great because it literally, you have Jango Fett like walking through the swamps. You just see him from like the waist down, and you see this guy, he has like a little straw. He's breathing through the water, and all of a sudden Jango's hand covers the straw, and he like comes up for air.
That's right. I forgot about that trailer.
Like that trailer hooked me. Like as a kid, I was like, holy crap! Like this is wild.
I know for Xbox, Ben, do you remember for Xbox, I know at one point in my house we had Obi-Wan Kenobi for Xbox.
That game, I'm about ready to start a social media campaign to get
listen,
the Xbox store.
That game is so dope.
Yeah, go on.
Go ahead.
On,
no, you're good. Like it's so fired. Like that game to play.
Oh yeah, no, I was just saying. Me and Chris were talking about that a few weeks ago. I was like, man. That's like the only game not on the Microsoft Store right now for Xbox for Star Wars related content. And that game was amazing because it literally, like the Jedi Apprentice books you and me read, Milton, it literally leads you right up to the Phantom Menace and into the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Dude. That game, the Obi-Wan Kenobi game, like you just said, I don't know why the heck that one has not been ported yet. And it's got such interesting control design because you actually use the right analog stick as your input device to swing the lightsaber around.
Yes, yep. and I remember how smooth it played. Was that early 2000s when it came out?
Oh yeah, it came out around the time of the launch of the Xbox original, so it had to be 2001, 2002.
Yeah, and I remember like that one coming out too. And another game that actually is cool for Xbox was the Clone Wars. Remember that one?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
That was a good one too, low key, because you got to play a lot of the vehicle stuff you played in it. Because that was one where I remember the ending of the game where you're in this ship, you're playing as Anakin in this ship. You're going up against like this dark Sith Force user machine.
Yep.
And somehow like Anakin becomes more powerful from destroying it. It was weird because the ending credits is like Obi-Wan's like, be careful, Anakin, of like your new power.
Yeah.
And he's like, don't worry about me, master, or something to that extent. I'm thinking that credit scene is fire. I'm thinking, oh, this is where he's turned into the dark side. It's gonna lead into episode 3. Like again, like it made me think like, all right, because we had no idea what 3 was going to be like, but that game made you think this is why he's got the dark side in him. Like, so again. Video games back in the day, fire.
That game was fire, and moving up to Xbox now. Again, another highlight Xbox game for me was the actual Revenge of the Sith video game. I think that's so underrated. I do.
Still have it on PlayStation
because if you play through that game, the best part, in my opinion, like that game's amazing and all, but the best part about that game is that came out like March. So it came out 2 months before Revenge of the Sith. So you could just play the movie. You could literally know exactly. I mean, I love it because it's like Lucas, under George Lucas, they're like, well, put out a video game. If it spoils the movie, whatever. But they did that. But I loved how that game ended where you could basically choose to, go to the dark side or, defeat Anakin. Like that whole ending sequence was amazing. I would say those games were I can't say those games were the biggest highlights. I think the biggest probably highlight, of course we said Battlefront. That game's, I still play that game, the original Battlefront. That's always a lot of fun. But for me, growing up in that time period, Halo obviously was such a big impact on people's lives and the gaming community as a whole. And to me, the big game that really hooked me was Republic Commando. Because my first thought when I picked up a controller for that game was like, this is Halo and Star Wars. And man, that game was great. Like all the different things you could do, using your directional pad to control your squad, like telling them to go search and destroy droids or defend this area or this or that. Like it just, again, amazing times for LucasArts back then.
Yeah, I remember
you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all.
Yeah, I remember the graphics on that game were incredible at the time. I was like, wow, this system could actually process that power. And it was like the Revenge of the Sith game in a way, because I think it came out maybe like a couple months before Revenge of the Sith. So it gave us our first look at the Magna Guards of like General Grievous's bodyguard droids. And I'm like, oh my God, these guys look so cool. And then they showed the Wookiees and you're on Kashyyyk, and it's showing you Kashyyyk for the first time before you see it in Revenge of the Sith. So I love those like tie-in adventures that like bring us close to the events, like you said with Shadows of the Empire, Milton, but show us like an alternate kind of view of that. We have Chris saying in the chat, if they remastered the old Battlefront 2 and didn't change anything and sold it for $100, I still pre-ordered it. Yeah, I think a lot of people are with you on that one, Chris, because that one has a huge following still.
He's right. No, like, look, that's my brother. He's right, because he knows I'd buy it too. Like he and I are on the same wavelength when it comes to those types of games, because to us, those first of all, those games were challenging for sure, but they weren't. How do I want to describe it? Like they weren't over the top in a sense. They're going to add all this extra crap that you have to pay for and microtransactions. It was like, no, it's levels. You have some secret levels here or there, but you played it and it challenged you for weeks on end. It wasn't like, oh, you got to buy a plus pack to do X, Y, and Z. No, that's ridiculous. Like nobody's not trying to do that.
Oh yeah, well that's like back then. I'm sure you guys remember one of the biggest things was games like Star Wars Battlefront 2 or other games was, going on to video game websites, onto different forums and looking up cheat codes for games. Like nowadays, the cheat codes are the microtransactions.
Right.
And like I remember, going on to like the Star Wars Battlefront forums and looking up, how to get unlimited ammo or you up your rank quicker or whatever. Like I remember doing all that stuff as a kid, and nowadays like cheat codes, they really don't exist.
Yeah, I mean I know like because I still have Revenge of the Sith on PlayStation 2, and actually played it recently, and you can still look those codes up. Like they're still online, but what's cool about the games back in the day, to me, like I said, I just think like it just did a good job of just expanding the story and just made you feel like you're part of Star Wars. Like I think that's what I know I miss that sometimes with some of the newer games. I still need to play Fallen Order. People keep telling me that. I know you guys told me to play that game. Eventually I will. Like one particular game that I'll never forget. I don't know if you guys remember this, but if you went to like the arcades back in the day or like Chuck E. Cheese, they had the Star Wars Trilogy arcade game where you played on Hoth, the Death Star, or Endor in the forest. And if you beat those particular levels, you got to fight Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi with the lightsaber. Yep. Do you remember that?
Yep, I 100% remember that.
Yeah. Oh. I listen, if I can somehow find that game or at least get an arcade version of it, like put in my house, I'd probably play it all day, every day.
I remember there was a part where you could fight Boba Fett at a bonus level on Jabba Silva.
Yep.
You were Luke and you were deflecting the blaster bolts back at him.
Yes. Yep. You were fighting him on the Sarlacc pit. I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
Like it's like like in the graphics for 1990 something 2000 was so. I'm like, this is crazy. Like so again, if I could find that game, that'd be amazing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, oh man. Yeah, great conversations with games and whatnot, and I want to move into what you guys liked about the George Lucas era. What was your favorite? If you could pick one thing, be it either the movies, the games, the books, anything prior to Disney purchasing, what was your favorite thing in Star Wars back then?
Go ahead, Ben. You start this one off.
Man, well, I could give the cheesy answer and say George Lucas was my favorite part, but no, other than George Lucas himself, I would have to say my favorite part about the Lucas era of Star Wars is just, in my opinion, Lucas's overall, like, sure, he had like his stories he was telling, like he was really sticking to like the mythology, like the hero's journey and things like that. But just overall, the overall storytelling as a whole for the Lucas era, like I really love, how he did obviously the original trilogy, filling in gaps with the prequels, then the Clone Wars, both the anime version and the CG version, and then just the way I felt like nowadays under like the Disney era, and it's nothing on the Disney era because they want to try to keep canon as tight as they can, but it's a double-edged sword because one of my favorite parts of the Lucas era is under that era, like he pretty much let creators run wild with Star Wars. Like they basically ran an idea by him. He was like, yeah, whatever, do it. Like for the video games, the books, whatever. I mean, heck, in one of the books, Chewbacca gets killed by a moon. Like,
oh my gosh, that's pathetic.
You have that sort of stuff. Like, I just love the creative freedom for all of the different forms of media under that umbrella, I would say.
Yeah, no, you're right on the money. So you didn't select a specific thing, but I like where you're going with just the overall process and the way they got the storytelling out, because that makes a huge difference, right? We wouldn't be here probably talking about Star Wars if Lucas didn't have a plan for how all the media would tie in, would sync in,
Right.
and his approval and everything. He could have just been flat out, nope, we're not making books, we're going to do the movies, and that is it. And well, Star Wars wouldn't have existed probably past 1985 if that was the case. So yeah, fair answer there. Fair answer there. What about you, Milton? Is there a certain thing in the George era, whether it be an idea or a movie or whatever?
Right. I can probably name a couple. I would say, one, I would say the celebrations that he started, the idea of celebrations. I believe like the
That's a good
first one was around like, was it before Revenge of the Sith or around that time, the first celebration ish or whatever it was. So just seeing that like conventions for Star Wars was like being created or was a new thing at the time or whatever, like that was cool. And now it blew up to, having Star Wars celebrations, pre-pandemic, they were every other year or every year. And now they're live streamed. So like a great legacy that he started still continues, not just the movies, not just the games, but the idea of celebrating Star Wars as a freaking culture in this country, as a religion, hell, it's global. So, I mean, it's amazing to see that his legacy carried on, and it's going to carry on through those celebrations, which is great. And I'm glad that the people have really embraced him whenever he goes back to those. And it was really nice to see that Hayden Christensen got all that love at the last one, I believe that was going on, where he showed up, and it was like, okay, like fans are coming around to him, and fans are really embracing him, so that's good. So that's one of my things. I would also say, the animation, like cartoons, and like him translating the main property into animation and I'm sure we'll talk about this with the Bad Batch later, but you have grown adults here in this podcast who love watching a 30 to 40 minute animation show, and it's just as good as watching a film. And that's George Lucas' legacy there too. Like, he knows how to translate from live action to animation, and it's flawless. So I'm like, that it's amazing. And then my last thing I would say would be just the balls that George Lucas had to take risk with his film, especially the original trilogy, because there's no way nowadays that probably Disney would allow George Lucas to say, okay, you have Darth Vader, who's the baddest man on the planet in the original trilogy. Let's make another character who's more evil than him and make Darth Vader sympathetic. So we're going to make the Emperor this guy who has no heart, no love, nothing, who just wants to kill everybody and dominate. But let's take our most poetic and most recognized villain who he's built up and make him like everyone else. Let's humanize him. There's no way Disney will allow that anymore. But George Lucas back in the day saw the bigger picture of Star Wars, and he took the chance to say, hey, this isn't just about good versus evil. There's more than this. It's family. It's a family thing. It's a cycle of violence. It's a cycle of trauma. That's what he was trying to show the fandom from my perspective. And I think that's why those Star Wars movies, the originals for sure, even with the prequels, they stand out so much because you connect with Anakin, you connect with Luke, you connect with Leia and Han in their struggle, and even Vader. You're like, man, at the end of the day, he's just a guy in a shell who lost everything. You know, we've all been through that before. We've all lost something or witnessed people lose something because they made poor choices, whether it's out of rage, jealousy, whatever. And it's like, man, like those stories always like seem to get me. Like I love watching whenever Luke takes off the helmet, you know, and sees his dad for the first time. You know, like that's a touching story. So yeah, man, like George, I just love all that. I love what he did to connect people with these characters.
Yeah, I really like the fact that you pointed out George for the fan communities. Not just with the fan communities with the celebrations, but you know, it was through him that he enabled like the 501st Garrisons. The 501st is the costuming group that goes around and you know they go around and they help kids out at hospitals and things like that to make people feel good that might not be able to celebrate in person with things like that. So he was able to start that up and fantastic. Yeah, everything about Vader and about how you're saying about how like Disney might have not gone that route, but George really took matters into his own hands. So man, you really covered a lot of ground that I think I would have liked to have said, but hey, that's cool too because hey, we all
my bad, dude. I just get excited about that stuff. It's just like again, if you're a fan of this property for as long as we've been, you don't just watch the films just to watch them. You definitely do your research and you understand that George took a lot of like life themes and history and mythology and religion and you know like different cultures and he blended it into these films. Like that's why everyone in the world can relate to these movies. I mean, the Jedi is a form of religion. The Sith is a form of religion. Like the world pretty much is a very religious or spiritual place. Someone believes in something. You know, Obi-Wan says it best. You know how the Force combines us and brings us together, and to that extent, like we all believe in something in that nature. So to me, George didn't just say, "Hey, just the Force is just like a power, whatever." He made you really think, like, "Oh, this could be something," and he made it relatable.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, with him, you know, like you mentioned, one of his biggest things throughout all of his time with Star Wars, you know, was him just being bold enough to do some of the different moves he did on screen, off screen. I mean, you know, we've all seen over the past few months the one picture that got filtered up. I think it was from Paul Duncan's book that came out. It was the picture of George Lucas between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, where he's on set for Attack of the Clones wearing the shirt. It has the quotes from the New York Times on it, like, you know, criticizing him for like the way they made Phantom Menace. And like, you know, he was, you know, and he just didn't care. He followed his lead. He didn't, you know, let outside noise filter, you know, his vision. I mean, look, even with the Phantom Menace, a lot of people say that movie is technically the only independent movie ever because Lucas fully funded it himself. And, you know, like him taking the courage to do that, if you look it up, like the budget for that movie was close to $100 million. And in 1990, that would have been about 97. 97, that's probably more like $120, $130 million budget nowadays or something.
Right.
Like,
and here's the thing, though, too, Ben. He was actually still pushing the envelope with a lot of technology that was still new.
Yep.
You know, I mean, really, think about it. We don't get the Marvel Cinematic Universe or DCEUs and whatnot now without George Lucas. I'm gonna tell it to anyone that wants to hear me because ILM is his baby, and John Knoll and Dennis Chang and all those guys, they push that envelope of technology to a place where it's like we can think of it now and it's available to us. You know, like Adobe, all that stuff. That's John Knoll's baby. John Knowles, you know, worked at Lucasfilm. ILM still there till this day. Like George did not. He created something far more lasting than just Star Wars through that technology. He's always was pushing that envelope.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one of the biggest parts. Like, it's debatable whether it's Star Wars or what George Lucas did outside of on screen, like his off, basically,
Yeah.
to use a sports term, his off the field stuff.
Right.
And, I feel his off the field stuff, like ILM and stuff like that, potentially has impacted Hollywood more and just the world more than the movies themselves. I mean, look, Lucas is one of his biggest things. We spent the first 20 minutes of this podcast talking about the action figures and everything. One of his biggest things when he was negotiating his deal for A New Hope was he would be allowed to have all of the merchandising rights,
Right.
because Fox, they were like, whatever, like, this movie is just this little sci-fi movie, so we'll give you the merchandising rights. And that turned out to bite them in the butt, because Star Wars exploded, and that was really the first movie to really hammer home the merchandising.
Right.
Like, little moves like that, Lucas made really showed how ahead of his time he really was. And just, like you said, the different influences on Hollywood, him and just those people at that time, like he was one of the biggest influencers, that we've known today. Like, it's bled over into all of our media we've watched today that we're all fans of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
true. And just to add on to that, Ben, I believe he got the sequel rights to the Star Wars films. I think because I know, like, they said, here, take them, which I think they'll never allow that anymore. They will never allow that. No matter what property you're trying to make, they'll say, nope, we'll have those film rights to the sequels.
Yeah.
George Lucas, like I said, he set the bar,
Yeah.
and he wasn't foolish. I mean, hell, he fought the Screen Actors Guilds or the Directors Guilds for, like, how he put the credits in.
Yeah.
Like, just stuff like that. It's like, this guy was a rebel. I mean, let's be real here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was Luke Skywalker and those guys, like, in film. I mean, so that it's great to see that. And I don't know, he's just, I know he's recognized clearly, but he needs to get so much more credit. Like, I'm sorry, I love film today because of what he's done.
Oh, for sure. I mean, his impact through Star Wars. I mean, look how impactful he was with Indiana Jones, other big franchises, and then obviously, like, ILM's work on Jurassic Park. I mean, just the other day, I literally just saw a tweet that went viral. Someone was saying Jurassic Park is one of the few perfect movies.
Yeah.
And that has to do with George Lucas and ILM. So, like, just the overall impact, it's amazing just to see what how he impacted, and the whole Lucas era impacted everything as we know it today. And then even just like the tail end of the Lucas era, like seeing a creator like George Lucas negotiate with a company like Disney for $4 or $5 billion, like that's amazing to see. Like, sure, obviously Lucas is like a 1 in a bazillion chance of, like, someone being like that, but that shows you, like, if you have a good enough idea and it, like, blows up and turns out to be, like, the next big thing, like, who knows, you could be that George Lucas negotiating with a big company like Disney or whoever someday. Like, it's just cool knowing, like, where Lucas came from to where he ended up at, like, when he ended up selling Star Wars to Disney.
Such great points. And I'm going to keep my answer short because I didn't say what I was going to say yet, but I will say the thing I appreciate most about the original trilogy, I'm going to keep this one short and simple, is Luke Skywalker, right? Luke Skywalker, created by George Lucas. I wouldn't really be into Star Wars probably if it wasn't for Luke, because Luke is my favorite fictional character out of any franchise, anywhere, anything. He's a character that I was able to see my eyes through as the character that is going through the hero's journey. Like, he got the idea from Joseph Campbell's ideas, right? So he has this character, starts from nothing and ends up being the most important, influential person in the galaxy. But it just gives you this great inspirational idea of, like, anybody can be what they want if they put their mind to it and they believe that they can believe in themselves to be able to accomplish what they want. And where we see him as, I want to go to Tashi, I want to go pick up the power converter thing, to seeing him like, I'm a Jedi at the end of Return of the Jedi. Like, you see that transformation of the character from the beginning to the end. And then well, we're going to save another topic for the Disney stuff in a second here, but just seeing through George Lucas's original trilogy, the growth and all that, and, you know, being able to give that mindset to me as a kid, wanting to be Luke Skywalker when I grew up, all that stuff, I wouldn't have really been affected, and it's all because of George Lucas created the character. So very simple but powerful one for me there. Now let's switch things over. The last 6 years or so, 7 years, since 2014, Disney had picked up the rights for Lucasfilm and, of course, all of Star Wars underneath of that. What are you guys most happy about or like the most about what Disney has done with Star Wars?
Okay, I only got two things. I'll be honest with you. Rogue One and anything that Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau touches.
Yeah.
Like I'm just keeping it simple this time. Like Rogue One was fire. Like that movie,
yeah.
To me, that's one of the, like, I like Empire Strikes Back, Revenge of the Sith, and then it's Rogue One for me. Like fire. Anything Clone Wars and Mandalorian. And again, those two guys can do no wrong. Go ahead.
For me, man, those are definitely great choices, and I would have to say, for me, my most favorite thing under the Disney era is I would have to say, I mean, at the moment, anyways, The Mandalorian, like, for what it's done, you know, to me, it really brought, well, The Mandalorian and Rogue One, I guess, both of them really brought to me the Star Wars feel back to things, if that makes sense. Like, I really love the way, you know, the storytelling was done in those movies, and you know, that movie, as well as the Mandalorian show itself. Like the Mandalorian really brought back that charm of the original trilogy. Like, you know, you're getting this new hero going on this hero's journey, like he's having a quest, like all of these sort of things, and then them naturally sprinkling in things that we've all come to know and love as well. Like, that's been one of the biggest, I would say, most attractive points to that entire series. Is it just feels, it feels right to me as a Star Wars show. And then, you know, Rogue One, as you said, Rogue One is excellent. I love that movie. I think it has it's really good. I love the story behind it, because the main person who pitched the idea there at Lucasfilm, I don't remember exactly which person it was, but they were trying to figure out ideas for what spin-off movie they wanted to do. It was like Rogue One. Well, it wasn't even called Rogue One at the time, but it was that movie, and there was like 7 other movies, and like the person came to like Kathleen Kennedy and like the story group and all them, and was like, "Hey,
John Knoll.
Why don't we do a movie based on like the first couple lines of A New Hope?" And boom, you know, that spawned this entire Rogue One movie. And Rogue One, in my opinion, was the first time we really got the on-screen acknowledgement of canon, quote unquote canon, because, you know, we get the connections. We see Chopper from Rebels, you hear General Syndulla, like all those little things. Like, you get the on-screen connections of canon, and so that's really neat. And of course, like, you know, the ending scene with Vader, like, that scene is something we all have wanted to see. Like,
yeah,
you know, during the Lucas era, obviously he wasn't able to do something like that with Vader in the original trilogy because of like technology limitations and things such as that. But, you know, that was, to see Vader in action like that, that was only something we really potentially emulated in video games like Battlefront and things like, and, you know, other properties. So seeing Vader in action had to have been, you know, it was just one of the most iconic moments, because I remember just sitting in theaters with my cousin, and like, as soon as the hallway goes dark, my cousin was elbowing me, and we were like, "Holy smokes, here comes Vader. Like, this is going to be wild." So like, just moments like that, I would say, are like the highlights of the Disney era as a whole. And I really do believe like, we mentioned there's been different social media discourse and things about Star Wars, and we don't really have to get into all that. But I do think Disney and the current heads at Lucasfilm are really listening to like fans' concerns about the franchise, because you can look at how they're like all their upcoming projects, their current projects, like the way they've done Mando, Bad Batch, things like that. Like,
Right.
you can tell they're listening and adapting to the fandom, which I can applaud them for being open-minded and potentially listening more to the fandom. And I think one of the biggest impacts to that entire thing, as you mentioned, Milton, is Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, and having them involved, is a huge big positive upside to the Disney era of Star Wars.
Oh yeah, definitely without a doubt. We got those guys that are steering the ship in a really good direction for everybody right now. That is, like you said, giving us those Star Wars moments as a kid. They're giving them back to us now. It's like as adults, we're growing through a whole nother generation. Disney's a whole nother generation of Star Wars fans growing up with Rey and Poe and Finn. And, while a lot of people aren't on board with the sequel trilogy, now it's said and done, I think there's certain things I really liked about it. Just that new trio of characters. And yeah, could I have done with some designs that are more different than the Empire? Sure. Could I have done with some better lightsaber battles? Sure.
For sure.
Things like that. But it was nice to see Star Wars come back the biggest way possible. Force Awakens comes out. It shatters box office records. It still holds the #1 domestic box office record at just below $1 billion in the domestic market. But I mean, I would say, and Ben, you kind of mentioned this in the George Lucas era of what we liked. But I'm going to go ahead and say I actually do enjoy what they're doing with the continuity all around in this time around. A lot of people, maybe even me included, said, okay, they disrupted Legends or the expanded universe. They disrupted all of that, started a blank slate in 2014. All that prior stuff is called Legends. And then they're building up, the books, the comics, the video games, the series, the movies are all on the same playing field. Now, granted, recently there's been some things with Bad Batch where they've kind of retconned, in a sense, one of the comic books. But, I mean, as we get further in, they're going to probably do that a little bit. But as long as the end goal of what happened in both of those things remains the same, I don't see much of a problem with that. But it is a nice kind of rewarding thing as somebody who, goes to the comic book shop every week and picks up these issues and gets the books and seeing these characters show up and things. It's like this really nice, rewarding moment where it's like, hey, I know that guy and he's got this really cool backstory, or I remember them talking about this event that happened and I know exactly what happened. So I've really been on board more than ever with Star Wars, thanks to the story group, who is the ones that are kind of in charge with shepherding in all this data. And as we get further along, it's going to get harder and harder to keep track of all this awesome stuff coming out. But for me, that is the #1 takeaway. I do the comic book reviews every week and all the different book reviews and stuff like that, where I'm just so engrossed with Star Wars more than ever. And it's just thanks to all this collaboration that's going on around all the realms of Lucasfilm over there.
Yeah, and Chris, just to piggyback on that, and I completely understand and agree. And I know you and I've talked about this before in the sense of like, I was fine with them making things legend, because some of the stories probably weren't the greatest in Legends, or I guess at the time, the expanded universe. So be it. If you want to do that, go ahead. If you want to start some new stories and expand off of the original trilogy characters and, whatever, that's cool with me. My only gripe was, and this is where I think Kathleen Kennedy, because she's the head of it, she made the statement herself. She, I think, put her foot in her mouth way too soon to think that, okay, we're going to make this stuff Legends and then say we're going to cherry pick from everything and take the best of the EU/Legends and make them into films, movies, games, comics, whatever. Did they do some of that? Yeah, you can technically say yes. But when you come out years later and say, well, we're not like DC and Marvel where they have all the rich backstories and comics from all these years past. Yes, you do. Like that, and that's where I get upset. And again, I'm gonna try to keep this positive. So listeners, please bear with me on this. This is where I get upset with Disney and Lucasfilm, like the head creators or head people that run the ship, because you are DC and Marvel. Like seriously, you have 30 years dating back to Splinters of the Mind Eyes to now, 30, 40 years of material that you're like, okay, these various artists and writers, whether it's James Luceno, Matthew Stover, Alan Dean Foster, who was one of the original, storytellers back in the day writing the books. You have their material. Take the best of it. You have it there. I'll give this is where the MCU is really good. MCU takes a lot of their old comic stories and adapts it to 2000 some now and make it really good. And they know how to keep all the stuff that doesn't work for the screen to keep it off, and they adapt it to the film well. Yeah. You could do that with Star Wars too. So don't tell me that you don't have the material when it's clearly there. Like that that's my issue. Because again, you have Jaina and Jason Solo, who would have been badass in a freaking movie. All right, you have all these materials these stories that we so much love and fell in love with. You could have taken it. Darth Plagueis. That's all I gotta say. All right, everybody wants Darth Plagueis novel turned into a movie or canon. You can do that. Just take that book, adapt it, what you need to do, piece it out. We can all understand if you have to take some pieces out, rework some things, and make it canon. We will accept it. Trust me. That's how good that book is.
Oh yeah. All
so
they have to do is...
I'm just saying, like, to me, that's where I get frustrated with Disney and Lucasfilm currently. It's like, come on, guys, you got the material. Stop acting like you're handcuffed. You're not.
That is true. They try to act that way sometimes, and it comes off like, okay, why are they saying this? Because it's so blatantly obvious that that's not the fact. But
yeah. And for some reason, no one calls them on it unless I don't see it. It's like no big time media outlet, I swear to God, never called them on it, except for maybe like the YouTube channels out there that were like pugnants of like reviewing this stuff. Which again, YouTube's a great platform now, but 10 years ago would have been 2011. YouTube was still fairly something that was taken off still. Like 2015, it was still booming, and it's like no one in the outlet was like, "Oh, no, they're just playing around." Come on, guys, hold these people accountable too.
Yeah. Well, I think as well, where I can cut them a little slack with certain things, like say the issues with the Ahsoka book and Manda. I can cut them slack on certain things because, they probably at the time they weren't expecting to do another season of Clone Wars. They weren't expecting to do the Bad Batch or things like that. So, I can cut them slack on things like there. The only time my ears have really perked up when it comes to the canon stuff is the comparisons of the novelizations between Force Awakens and Last Jedi to the Force Awakens and Last Jedi movies, because you have Rey and Poe meeting in the Force Awakens, but then you have them re-meeting. Yeah. Literally, Rey says, "I'm Rey," and she literally introduces herself in the Last Jedi, and it's like, wait, hold up. So, little things like that, but I can cut them slack, early from, pieces of canon that were early on in the Disney era, because they weren't expecting to do, certain projects like all of these. And, I think we'll still have potential canon slip ups like that here and there. But again, you and me talked about it before, Chris, on here or on our previous live streams. Maybe, you can view it as kind of like, these are stories getting told potentially from different people's points of view. Mm-hmm. So you get the book story of what X event happening, and then you get the movie story of X event happening. Maybe the book story was getting told from X character's point of view, and maybe the movie was getting told from X character's point of view. Maybe you can view it like that, and that can help potentially people who may find issue. But I think the whole canon thing, I think it will become a more tighter of a ship as things go. Because now they're in the swing of it. Now we're 5-6 years into the Disney era, so now they're like figuring out what works and what doesn't, and they're definitely adapting.
Yeah. So I want to move us on to another segment here, and this is going to be one that the name is probably going to change, or how I'm going to actually introduce it will probably change, but that is what we'll do at the beginning of probably every episode going forward, and that is, what kind of Star Wars thing do you want to bring up that you might have experienced this week? Whether it be, oh, you got a cool Star Wars t-shirt, or you watched this movie and seen something you didn't actually know about before. I'll just start off by saying I read, and it's on the channel and it's reviewed, the Star Wars The Fiction Collection. It's all these Star Wars insider short stories that were published over like the last decade. This is volume 1, so it's not every single one of them, but it's like some legend stories. There's one about Dash Rendar. There's one about Darth Plagueis and Darth Tenebris, and there's ones about Jaina Solo. It goes the whole spectrum. So I really enjoyed just diving in. And as somebody who doesn't really read legend stuff, because I'm so concentrated on all the canon stuff, it's hard to keep up with that just alone, that it was nice to kind of go back in time and experience some of these characters that aren't even canon anymore and see what their adventures were like. So I'm going to put the heat on for Ben. Was there something this week that you did that you might want to mention?
I would have to say right now for me personally, the one thing I did throughout this week was so like right now personally for me, I'm like going through a dieting phase, losing some weight. So after I get done lifting weights every day, I'll get on the treadmill and do like 20-25 minutes of cardio. So I've been just throughout the week, I lift weights 5 days a week. So the last 5 days, today I wrapped up volume 1 of like the Tartakovsky Clone Wars. Like I'll just watch like 20-25 minutes of it, and then I'll continue it the next day, and just watching that series, like I just love that series so much. Like, I mean, we did a 2-hour podcast about it. You and I did, Chris, on the first initial like Outer Rim transmission run. And I just love that series. Like, I just think it's so well done. And again, it's like, during that Lucas era of Star Wars, like it was really nice. Like the way that Tartakovsky Clone Wars like leads up to, to Revenge of the Sith, and it fills, it started filling in the gaps. And again, going back to when we were younger, like all the excitement, like every Friday night getting excited to watch a 5-minute episode of a show, like on Cartoon Network. Like that was one of the, like, I remember as a kid, like in, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, like getting excited. Oh, it's Friday. I'm going to watch this Star Wars show. And then it's like from 8:55 to 9 o'clock. So like, that show was great. And, that's pretty much what my Star Wars experience this week has been, is just, watching the Tartakovsky Clone Wars.
Yeah. Was that on Disney Plus that you're watching it?
No, not yet. It's not on Disney Plus yet. Or I don't think it's on Disney Plus.
Oh, no, it is.
Oh, it is. Oh,
yeah, because I watched them a couple weeks ago. They're there.
I've been just watching it on YouTube, actually.
Yeah, no, they're there. They're there. They look good.
They're much better quality than YouTube, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Then I'll definitely have to switch over to Disney Plus then.
Yeah, because they split it up in 2 seasons, so they're like an hour and 20 minutes apiece.
Yep.
Yeah,
whatever it is.
I like how, like you said, Ben, how they bridge the gap. And yes, everybody, you can go back in the playlist and watch our 2-hour discussion of us just talking about that darn thing. But the fact that we see characters get it, like the Togruta character, what is her name? The one that's from Revenge of the Sith. We actually see her getting killed. Shakti, right? Does she get captured, or does she get killed in that?
She gets captured.
She gets captured.
Because in the Revenge of the Sith deleted scene, she is in there getting executed. They never actually had that in a movie.
Yeah, she's been killed like 100 different times in Star Wars. I mean, you had that go on with her. You had, in my opinion, one of the most iconic parts of that series was the ARC Troopers. Those were amazing. Mm-hmm. Like that whole sequence. General Grievous though was great, and I love, again, like Lucas's little thinking of like, ooh, we're gonna have Grievous have this coughing problem in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
So they have Mace Windu crush his chest in that series. So like little tidbits like that, which is really cool.
For sure. Let's turn over to Milton, man. Do you have anything you want to talk about? Anything you might have experienced this week that it's worth mentioning?
Oh man, I'll say this is a weekly thing, but I'm sure next week I'll have something brand new. But normally weekly, just like Ben, I usually work out throughout the week. And always my go-to when I do cardio are like watching Star Wars trailers or like Star Wars clips, because like it gets me motivated and hyped up. It keeps, like, especially when if I'm running on a treadmill, I need something to get me amped and keep my mind focused. And usually it's Star Wars trailers or some type of like Star Wars compilation or something with Dragon Ball Z for sure. But yeah, like I always go to that. And I would say something actually that probably did happen this week is when I was at my office this past week, I was cleaning up and I realized that I had like these Star Wars, like they're in the box, but they're like postcards that I've never opened. And they're still sitting there and I forgot that I had them. So I think eventually I want to open those up and check them out and see what's all in them. But I think my life, just seeing little Star Wars things that are like, whether it's my office or my home, it's like it constantly reminds me of like, you know, how great that property is. Hell, right behind me or to my right is a Star Wars cup. Like in my little like bedroom closet area. Well, this is like my office second closet. So I was like, oh yeah, cups. I have Star Wars cups everywhere. You know, so it's just stuff like that. It's like, all right. I run into it every time when I'm walking in my house or somewhere. So yeah, man. So that's pretty much this week. 'Cause I know today when I was at the gym, I watched it's called Star Wars: The Ultimate Trailer. It's like a 4-minute clip,
And
it goes from like Revenge of the Sith or from Episode 1 to Return of the Jedi, or maybe Episode 7, and they splice it together well with the music, the timing. You feel so like connected. Like, oh yeah, pretty much. If you were a layman who never seen Star Wars, watch this clip. You'll get what they're talking about.
Oh yeah, I love seeing those type of clips on YouTube. Like, just you know, because it's just really cool. Like, just to get you hyped, get you going, certain things like that. Like, I mean, you know, as you said, Milton, when you're doing cardio or things like that, you go down the rabbit hole looking up Star Wars stuff, and who knows what you run across half the time. You know, some of it's really like, whoa, what's this on YouTube for? But like one of the cool things I discovered, you know, on YouTube before, I mean, it was weeks ago, so I guess it doesn't apply to this week, but someone made like a little, like I don't know, like a play-by-play clip of, so when, you know, right when, I guess when Padme is saying they're still good in Anakin and Revenge of the Sith, it almost matches up exactly with the timestamp of when like Vader throws the Emperor over the edge in Episode 6. Like it's literally off by like 0.0, like it's less than a half of a second. And it's literally like when she's saying they're still good in him, like it's like the exact timestamp almost. And that was one of the coolest things someone pointed out. Like, you know, just little things like that. Like it's, you know, like you said, Milton, that's like a weekly thing. Like when you're doing cardio, you know, you're making dinner, you just look up little things like that on YouTube, and boom, there you go. There's a half hour gone.
Right. Star Wars does so well with making the minuscule and the medial task of life just fly away so much faster. I mean, that's why I got into podcasting, because I started listening to Star Wars podcasts, so it'd make my jobs at the time go away a lot less painful and a lot less monotonous. Yeah, there's a great band out there. I'll shout them out. They're called Galactic Empire. And on May the 4th, I went for a run and I played nothing but Star Wars music from this metal band that does Star Wars covers. They're freaking fantastic. So excellent. Yes. And we're going to come back to this probably weekly. We'll see how it goes. We'll see what we can bring up every week. If not, no big deal. But what we'll normally do in a week is also talk about the Star Wars news. And well, this week was a good week to start this podcast with our introductions because, well, there's not much to talk about, frankly. What was going to be a news story turned out to be no news story at all, because there's a whole big bunch of people just on Twitter talking about, hey, Dave Filoni got promoted to a creative director. And I'm sitting here saying, the guy has kind of been in charge of Star Wars since the Clone Wars. Like everything he's touched, you know, from Star Wars, Clone Wars to Rebels to Resistance to Mandalorian. It's like, yeah, I've already been thinking since like 2008 or 2009, that guy's already kind of had the reins on Star Wars. And then, of course, we got confirmation from a Variety article someone saying that, oh yeah, Lucasfilm just finally got around to doing this. Apparently, he's had the promotion for quite a while already. So, again, sometimes Star Wars kind of makes the communities kind of make a big deal out of nothing. I guess this was going to be maybe leading some fuel for the fire of the people that,
Right.
some people don't like the fact that, Kathleen Kennedy's in charge. Some people like Dave Filoni to be in charge. That's fine. Some people just like want that to happen like so aggressively that it's kind of ridiculous because like when they throw threats and stuff at people for this stupid thing, it doesn't make sense. But
yeah, I think with that type of stuff, I mean, and I know we've talked about it in the group chat. Like, here's the thing, people. We all love Dave Filoni. That's evident. I think everyone loves him no matter what. I think clearly everyone loves Jon Favreau. There's a difference from being an executive, like, president, compared to someone who's a creator and who's a director. And I think, from my understanding, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are creators, and they know how to lead people and lead men and women. But do we really want to take that away from them, take their creative side away from them? Do we really want to have Dave Filoni be that executive president who just manages people? I want him to create.
mm-hmm.
Like, yes, like I think in a selfish realm, we want him to be in charge because I think we know he would really take care of it and he really would care. Not saying that Kathleen Kennedy does not care. I think as fans, and like Chris said, we hype up everything. And I think we haven't really had a lot of big Star Wars news in a while. I think if we really sat back and thought about it, we want Dave to be in a creative chair because he knows Star Wars. He understands it. So I'm okay with this promotion. I'm okay with where he's at. I would like for him to take over someday as the executive president or whatever it is, but I'm cool with him being a creator right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, for me with the whole, just to briefly touch on that situation, for me, I would say, like, sure, there've been I've had different criticisms of the way Kathleen Kennedy's managed things at Lucasfilm, but at the end of the day, from her and like the higher up executive side of things, Star Wars has raked in billions and billions of dollars under her watch. So
absolutely.
So the thing is, like, me, like, coming from, say, like a business side of things, like, hey, you're raking in the cash, like, you're doing something right. So, like yeah, my criticisms of Kathleen Kennedy, that'll be a podcast for another day. But like with in terms of like Filoni, I think, in my opinion, his role would not be just stepping into Kathleen Kennedy's role. I think his role needs to be along the lines of something like Kevin Feige from Marvel, because Kevin Feige really handles a lot of like the direction and like the whole outline of the MCU. And I think that's a role that would suit Filoni really well. But I honestly think with his different experiences and things like that, I think that would be a really great role for Jon Favreau. Because, he's touched so many different franchises, from Iron Man to The Jungle Book and now Star Wars. Like, he's successful wherever he goes.
Lion King. Let's not forget about Lion King.
Lion King is great. So, you have different things like that. But yeah, I think that's like my only little tidbits about that. It's just, and I think it's a matter of time, because just to be fair on the Dave Filoni situation, like, sure, he had, I would say, a lot of people have wanted him to be promoted since like Disney bought Star Wars. And to me, like, if you're coming from like the other side of things, you can't go and promote someone who doesn't have that type of experience. Like Kathleen Kennedy had a lot of those type of experiences. Like Dave Filoni, his experience was strictly on the creative side. Like, so, if they would have went and straight away just promoted him to the main president, like he could have ran the company into the ground. Like we all love him, but he could have ran Star Wars into the ground, and we might have not been talking about Star Wars tonight. Like,
yeah,
so like you have little things like that to look at when it comes to, that whole discussion. Like, like a lot of people forget, Star Wars or Marvel or DC, it's what we see on screen for 2.5 hours is nothing compared to the thousands of hours people put into these movies. Like, to make one Star Wars or Marvel movie, there's probably hundreds, if not close to 1,000 people that work on those movies. So like, it's so much bigger than just one person. And I think eventually Filoni will get to a point where he is a Kevin Feige type role. But again, he's just having to work his way up the ladder because, look, we had his, as we mentioned before on our Mandalorian reviews, he's really grown as a creator because in my opinion, his first episode in season 1 of Mando was definitely the weakest of season 1, in my opinion. And then you can tell he's grown and he's really aware as a director and creator because fast forward to season 2 and you have his Ahsoka episode. And honestly, going into the episode, I had so many concerns that it was going to just be like a Clone Wars flashback, pretty much of like just Ahsoka overpowering Mando, but she didn't. She was utilized really well for that episode, and she was still a side character, and the focus was still on Mando and Grogu. So like that showed Dave Filoni maturing as a creator. And I think as he matures and grows as a creator, it's going to just get better and better, and he'll eventually get to those higher up roles. It just will take time.
Yeah, I just don't think you guys both said that. I just don't picture Dave Filoni paying the bills, doing the menial task of I gotta put this kind of budget here, put that kind of budget there. That's not Dave Filoni. I mean, I don't know the guy personally, obviously, but I mean, I've watched so many interviews, and this guy's got so much passion for the creative side of things, and he is like the Padawan of George Lucas, and I don't even think George Lucas would really want that from Dave. So that is the news. Yeah, not really news, but hey, we wanted to discuss something for at least a little bit, and this will transition us into the final part of the show. Over an hour and a half later, we're finally going to talk about this darn episode, guys. So for everybody that's watching live, or if you're watching after the fact and you haven't watched season 1, episode 4 of Bad Batch called Cornered, then you can go ahead and put a pin in this and come back later because we are talking full-blown spoilers on this very here review of the Bad Batch. So just running through this episode, we have the Bad Batch. They are on the run still, trying to find out where to go. They find out that their ship might be getting tracked. So they have to go and change their transponder, which makes them have to land on Pantora. We get to see Pantora for the first time, and that is where they go trying to find money. They realize that, hey, we're clones and we have to deal with the real world now, and the Republic isn't a thing, so we have to find a way in this galaxy. And then that is when Omega gets lost, and that's where our big tie-in with the Mandalorian happens, and we have Fennec Shand trying to take her away. We don't know to who exactly yet. I have my ideas, but this episode ends in what I think of as the best action sequence so far in the Bad Batch, with this awesome speeder chase, and then Hunter gets Omega and they get out of there safely. But that's not without Fennec Shand finding out what she can about where they're going next. So that is what happened in Cornered. I'm going to throw it over to Milton, man. Just first off, actually, before we even get to the episode, you haven't been on our previous episode reviews that me and Ben have been doing on the channel. So just give us like a quick rundown, your thoughts, because we are actually a quarter away through the 16 episode season. What have you been thinking of the Bad Batch so far, man? I can't wait to hear your thoughts.
Loved episode 1. My plan was to binge the first 4 episodes because I wasn't going to watch it weekly. But I think after a couple days of the premiere coming out, I watched like the first 10 minutes, loved it, and then I finished it like the next couple days. I finally finished episode 2 and 3 this past week, and then I've watched 4 this morning. Love the first 3 episodes. The storytelling's tight. I love the dynamic of the Bad Batch, like the different characters. It was interesting to see what's going on with Crosshair or the Crosshair? Yeah, Crosshair. I like his battle within. You can still tell he's he's still partial to his brothers, but he's following the chip. I think something's gonna happen. We know something's gonna happen with that. Tarkin is Tarkin. Like they play. Yeah, I forget who the voice of him.
Steven Sam.
Yes, he does a good job playing Tarkin.
He really does.
He's no Peter Cushing, but he's pretty close to it. And his character's consistent. I love the transition from the Republic to the Empire.
Yeah,
that was smooth. It was smooth. Like I believe that's how it would have gone live action wise. So first 3 episodes were really good. I cannot wait as the season progresses. I'm going to be that Debbie Downer for this one, guys. Wasn't really into this episode, I'll be honest with you.
Oh.
I thought it was very predictable. I mean, you kind of saw where it was coming because Omega was like, "Oh, I want to come with you guys to go look for credits and get supplies." And you knew she was going to get into trouble. You knew she wasn't going to listen, and she was going to get overzealous. And don't get me wrong, there's some good things about the episode, but I didn't like the majority of it. I laid in bed and I was like, man, I'm really not feeling this episode. That's exactly what I said. But to me, I kind of feel like this episode, I don't want to say filler because I feel like all of them are progressing the story. It just felt the story wasn't fleshed out the better to me personally.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like connected with the story because I like Fennec Shan as a character because you know why? We know what she's going to turn into in The Mandalorian. So to me, it was kind of hard for me to see her as a bad guy because I was like, I know she's going to make a turn and she's already made the turn and all that type of stuff. But it's like, I don't know. I thought it was just clunky, but
okay.
I mean, it wasn't terrible.
Well, you know what it is, Milton. And Chris, you and I talked about it on last week's podcast. The big issue, I feel like Mando had it for one episode. How many times are we going to crash on a planet, fix the part, and then continue the mission at the end of the episode? How many times are we going to do that? Because that is my only criticism of this episode.
I didn't think about that. You're absolutely right because they did it before.
How many times are we gonna? Oh, let's go visit Captain Rex next week. Oh wait, let's crash on another planet. Like, how many times are we gonna do this? Because that is my only critique of this episode. Like, this episode, in my opinion, was really good as a whole. But man, how many times are we gonna crash on a planet and then a creature took our part. Oh wait, let's get it back. Hey, this happened. Oh, let's do this. Like, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I enjoyed the episode for the most part, but just the whole dynamic of crashing on a planet, fixing, and then continuing the mission with only 1 minute left in the episode drives me crazy. But I really liked a lot of the episode though. Like, setting that little rant aside, I did like a lot of this episode. Like, I liked Fennec Shan a lot. I really think Ming-Na Wen, I don't know, just the way her, because sometimes voice actors don't translate. Sometimes,
she does. She does.
If you guys know what I'm saying, like sometimes, like a character can do the voice of the same character they play on screen, and it sounds off, in my opinion. So, like, I don't know, Ming-Na Wen, her voice translates perfectly to her. Her character, like her movements, like the animation for Fennec Shan was great. And I loved that, she was kind of befriending Omega, like just to see what was going on early on in the episode. Like, I thought that was really great. And then I really like Omega's character development so far because, again, last week we had her joining the squad, and then this week, they're reminding us, she is still a kid. She's like, she literally said, can't we go and explore? Like, so, stuff like that. I'm really liking her character arc as it continues. And then I did get kind of a little chuckle about the clone's little scheme, to sell Echo, like as a droid and all that. Like, I did get a little laugh out of that. I was like, oh, that was pretty clever.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, how about you, Chris? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, and I don't want to speak for you guys, of course, but I think where I can see the problem what you guys are having with this episode, because I actually really enjoyed it, is that there might have not been as much character development in any of the characters that we had before. Like all the other episodes, I feel like a character started out at one point, they ended up at some point differently. What this episode did for me was it did the world building, it expanded the world building, it gave characters like Echo finally something to do. Echo finally had a good part in this episode where he actually had some interesting things to say, and the episode actually focused on him, like, as what his function actually is in a team. Because up until that point, I'm like, what's the difference between him and Tech? And oh yeah, he's got this really cool costume. He could literally be like a droid and pose as a droid, which he does in this episode. But I don't know. I think Fennec Shand did such a cool thing in this episode where it kind of subverts the expectations, at least with me. It's like, okay, you see this bounty hunter, she's got the helmet on, she's in her ship, she's like, I'm gonna go get the target. You're just assuming that she's gonna go and like shoot her or like have some kind of tranquilizing door, do some kind of violence and just take her away. But no, she takes off the helmet and she plays this really calm and collected, motherly kind of figure. And it's not until Omega notices that she has a blaster and then that Hunter comes along that she actually decides to go to violence. But that was the turning point of the episode where I said, oh, they have a lot of things to say about Fennec Shand. Now, of course, like you said, Milton, yeah, like we have a lot of this backstory or foreshadowing, I should say, because we see her I guess it's about 30 years in the future that we see her in Mandalorian. But I mean, this thing was like a spectacle. I think this was the best looking episode. Just the background, the animation in general was the best because like we see a city planet and I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, they're like reenacting Attack of the Clones with the speeder chase. It looks so good. Yeah. I was just like, I could watch that speeder chase like 30 times. It looks so good with them jumping across and then Omega. That's the good thing about Omega. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people like her right up front, other than they did with like Ezra and maybe Kazuda Ziona and some of these other younger characters, Ahsoka. She's really useful. She's not bratty. She makes mistakes, and we see her making that mistake that, hey, I even remember making the same mistake she did. When I was a kid, we went to Disney World, lost my parents. I tugged at the shirt of somebody that was, tall, and I was like, I can't find my parents. And they kind of helped me find their parents. So I literally had the same experience as Omega in this episode.
Way to go. Way to go, Chris.
Crazy. So making these connections.
Yeah. But I will say one thing I do like about this show, which kind of surprised me, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised, how violent it is.
Oh yeah.
Because because when they kill people, they kill people.
Oh yeah.
Because I thought that execution scene, I think it was episode 3 or 2, yep. Whenever it was 3, whenever they send the clone or the troopers with with Crossfire.
Yep.
Or Crosshair to like kill those Saw Gerrera camp refugees, whatever. They just execute them and burn them.
Uh-huh.
I was like, literally, I'm not joking. I was like, holy shit, this is the type of show we're gonna get. Like they burnt them alive.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh snap! Like, all right, like that's again, and I like the cold open to each episode because it's very cinematic. I'm like, all right, that's kind of tight.
And you see Fennec Shand in this episode just shoots one of the police officers, people. And you actually see
in the chest,
guy.
You see it.
You actually see the blaster bolt go through his chest. Like, whoa.
Oh yeah, the way they did Fennec Shand in this episode was great. Like, I really like. I mean, she was one of my favorite just side characters from Mando. Ming-Na Wen just does such a great job playing her. Yeah. And then you have like with her, I really think she's going to impact Omega, like long term for this show, just because, of her saying to Omega, like, you got to be careful when you're in this galaxy alone. You might want to carry a blaster, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think that's going to like echo to Omega, like long term potentially into this series. Like, it could lead to Omega like wanting a blaster at some point. Like maybe, who knows, maybe in the next episode, she talks to Hunter about it. Like, you could potentially have that, especially now that they know Omega's the target. Maybe, who knows, maybe the clones initiate it and say, hey, we want to train you, we want to show you how to use these blasters now, so maybe you have something like that. And also it was pretty cool. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess I'm 50-50 on it, but it's cool at least seeing how strong or tough like Fennec Shan is.
Yeah.
Because she goes and like she throws Wrecker aside like he's a nothing.
Yeah, she
Like
wrecks him.
and I was kind of yeah. I was kind of at first like I don't know about that scene just because like Wrecker should have put up more of a fight, but then again it does show how I mean she is at the time one of the more top level bounty hunters in the galaxy presumably, and that shows I guess leading her into Mando like she was one of the people to take out all the Hutts like so so you have that sort of thing at least like kind of foreshadowing how like much of a badass she is compared to potentially any other like say generic bounty hunter we could get into this get inserted into this series or any other like Star Wars property. It's cool just seeing her character like it's just the whole like level thing like you have certain characters like the clone troopers are here, the bounty hunters like Fennec Shan is here, and then Tarkin up here or whatever like it's cool seeing like the power order, I guess you would say.
Yeah, it's really neat because ever since they first introduced Fennec Shan, before we've even seen the character, you have the guy that's sitting in the cantina. Oh man, what the heck is his name? The guy that's in The Mandalorian, he's in episode 5, season 1. He's that guy that just gets blasted in the end of the episode by Mando. But anyway, he's all going on about her accolades and about how this character has done this and does that, is wanted by these characters, and that's why she has a hit on her. So I was like, oh man, we gotta get some comic backstories on this character or a novel mention. Little did I know she would appear fully fleshed out in an animated series just like this. Was just fantastic seeing her acting without the helmet, then putting the helmet on and becoming like this other machine. Like you said, guys, about how she was so adept in the combat prowess that she possesses, that she's able to go around and just subsequently just taking out Hunter, Wrecker, and then puts up a fight on top of moving speeders. Like, she's not even force sensitive, but man, is she a really good hunter.
Well, my thing with her is I was really thinking about it, especially in this episode with the whole speeder chase, that whole scene. She is definitely like, I don't care what they say. Like, I want to get Dave Filoni alone and ask him, is this like your version of Zam Wessel from Attack of the Clones? Because she has to be.
You're
like
right.
Like I don't care what anybody says from Lucasfilm. Like, she has to be modeled after Zam Wessel. Like, she is literally Zam Wessel and is not a changeling. Like, that's literally
I
like
never thought about that, but even if you look at the way her outfit is, she's got like that big over the trench coat, some kind of helmet, right? So yeah. Okay, now I'm never gonna forget that fact.
Yeah, like I just cannot unsee that. Like, I just think she is. And then I don't know, like you said, Chris, like the whole just scoping shots of like the city. Like, I thought that was all really, just done really well for the most part. Yeah,
the city. I was so surprised because we've seen the trailers. We broke down the trailers. I thought for sure that it was Zygeria, which I think we're still going to get. But yeah, Pantora. In the Clone Wars, you see these blue people. I thought they were the Chiss at first, but then we know that they don't have the red eyes. So they're like, oh, this is a new species in Star Wars called the Pantorans. And I just assumed that these people came from a cold climate. Maybe it's just because, they have the blue skin. Maybe they're more adapted for like an icier type planet. But it's like the complete opposite. It's basically like an arid, hot looking planet. But just the way we see the traffic through the sky reminded me of Coruscant. And again, we're seeing the impact of the Empire already. We've seen what they are doing on Seleucami with the chain codes. Now they're initiating chain codes on this planet. They're talking about the Imperial currency. And again, I think one of the striking points of this episode was seeing how the clones exist in an Imperial society, because they are so used of going throughout the galaxy in the Republic. The Republic, obviously doesn't have to pay for crap because that's the government. So they are the property of the government. Wherever they land during the Clone Wars, they don't really have to pay anything because they're just the clones. They're the guys that are working. That's what they pay for. The people pay the taxes for the clones to go on their missions and to use their fuel and all that kind of thing. So now they're stuck at a standstill where like, oh, we're actually on the run from the Empire. So we actually have to figure out how we're actually going to get these funds ourselves and how we're going to get the fuel ourselves. And that's the one redeeming quality about this episode, because I was like you guys, I was like, oh, here we go again. I said this last week. Oh, we got the classic Star Wars animation trope of crash landing on a planet. And oh, now in this episode we have the classic trope of, oh, we got to get food and fuel. But at least they had a different kind of way of attacking that problem from the perspective of, oh, we used to have no problem getting this stuff, and now we have to figure out how we're going to make money. Now we're going to have to figure out how to tie loose ends. I mean, you see how they interact with the Soliston on the platform about how Wrecker's like, oh yeah, I'll just muscle this guy away. And like the guy's like, no, I need money. And they're like, who's got the money here? Like, it was just this very awkward situation. But I really like that they're going into that kind of detail with how these clones are operating in this current society.
It makes sense. I mean, they're showing how soldiers, transition from being soldiers to civilian life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but clearly in this case, they're on the run. But yeah, I mean, that's one thing I do like about this show is that hopefully we're going to see more of that transition of what these clones were doing post Galactic War. Like just to see that transition of the Empire, what responsibilities the clones will actually have anymore, because clearly the humans that are in the military want them phased out. Tarkin said it himself, like, this is too much of a project. It's too much money. Like, we need to just get normal recruits, and there's a big push for that. So I'm sure as the season goes on, we'll get more of that story.
Yeah. Who do you guys think that Fennec Shand is reporting to? I know that me and Ben put out some speculation about it last week. What do you think?
I can probably guess who you guys saw it last week. I think she works for the cloners, Kaminoans, because like that's the only explanation. Like if you had to write this story, that's logically how the story has to be written. Like I mean, there's no way Tarkin knows about her, and how special she is. So you wouldn't think anyone in the Empire would know how special Omega really is, because technically she is the 5th genetic clone that's special. Yep. So the Kaminoans had to be the ones that say, hey, we want her back. Like, she's important for a reason. And I've saw some theories on YouTube that talked about maybe she's the version of Star Killer, because she might be Force sensitive or something like that. Oh. But again, it's theory.
Well, my thing with potentially who she could be talking to, like it's definitely could be like the Kaminoans, as we said. But also, I think there's having Filoni involved and everything, like, I think there's a decent chance that I think we could potentially get a mirroring type of episode from the original, like the Clone Wars, the first round of Clone Wars series from from 08 to 09, like that range. I think we could get a mirroring bounty hunter type thing in this series. Like maybe you're gonna have Fennec Shand reporting to a young Boba Fett. Maybe you have like Boba getting his crew around of like bounty hunters, because my thing about Fennec Shand is, like, sure, Boba rescuing her in The Mandalorian, sure, that could be just literally him being like, hey, I'm Boba Fett, I'm saving you or you're gonna die, and you need to just stay with me. Or did they have a prior relationship, not as in like a love relationship, as in a work relationship? Like what if they work together? What if this is like the early stages of Boba, Fennec Shand, potentially other bounty hunters involved? Like what if it's the early buildings of that work relationship between Boba and Fennec? And man, if we see a young Boba Fett and like maybe not in his full like green armor, maybe like parts of the armor is like in my gosh, like part of the armor be green, part of the armor have some chrome plates from Jango's, like little tidbits like that. Like maybe we get a young Boba Fett, or maybe we get, like, in my opinion, like in terms of animation, Boba Fett has been what he has been. Like he's been good, but in my opinion, the best animated bounty hunter by far. What if we get like the legend himself, Cad Bane, back? Like what if he gets involved? Because to me, when it comes to Dave Filoni, I feel like all cards are on the table because he connects and brings back so many characters and things from his former properties. I mean, look, Ahsoka was in Rebels and things like that. So what if we get Cad Bane? What if we get Boba Fett? What if we get like this crew of bounty hunters? And you kind of mirror like that little bounty hunter arc that was in the Clone Wars series.
Oh man, that would be awesome. And I have an idea I'm going to float by you guys that I've been thinking about over the last couple weeks. We talk about the Bad Batch as a title, the Bad Batch pertaining to the select clones of Clone Force 99. But I think there's already been a precedent set that, obviously you don't have to be one of Clone Force 99 to be part of the Bad Batch. And what I'm getting at here is maybe what we could see is members going in and going out of the Bad Batch akin to, let's say, the Avengers, right? The Avengers over the years, like, hey, 1 minute they might have Vision, the next minute they have Quicksilver, right? So could we possibly see, like you said, maybe Boba Fett is part of the Bad Batch for some time. Maybe Fennec Shand and Boba Fett joined Bad Batch and they're going around the galaxy. Maybe you get like I don't know, just name any other kind of scrupulous like underworld type of character that could just kind of be in place of the Bad Batch. And I could see like that could be where they really open up the storytelling in the dark times of Star Wars, is like, hey, every season tune in because we might actually have some other characters you would never expect to be part of like the Bad Batch's journey, because we might see like some of the Bad Batch die. I think they're making a lot of, I hate to say it, I think we mentioned last week, you did actually, Ben, is that we have Wrecker getting his head hit many times.
Yeah,
it's like, and he gets his head hit again. Like, I feel like the chip is just going to go off at one point and he's going to try to kill everybody around him or something.
I think actually that's part of the reason why Fennec Shand was able to beat him so easily. Maybe he's still suffering from like after effects from last week, because I mean, sure, it was a week in our time, but in Star Wars time, maybe that was just a day later, like, so, there's potential for that. Like, I think Wrecker, I think the only clone that may have like plot type armor until at least the very end will be Hunter, just because he's kind of like the Anakin to Omega's Ahsoka for this series. But all the other clone troopers, I feel like they're expendable. Like even, as we mentioned before, you have not like the repetitiveness, but like the, you basically have the same character in Echo and Tech. So, I feel like one of those two characters could get taken out at some point. And I feel like, unfortunately, I think it could be Echo just because he's not one of the newer characters. And, his death, see, and I'm not saying that in like a disparaging way, it would be more of a valuable death to us as fans, just because we built like a relationship with that character from the Clone Wars to now. So I think there's a chance that he could be done. I think Wrecker could be, as I said before, just because he's kind of like the comedic relief. And then, if you have him get taken out, it'd be like, oh man. So I don't know. And I think that could be like a big potential moment for Omega too, for this series. Like if, as like even Fennec Shand was saying to Omega, like, the galaxy is like such a big and dangerous place. Like, has Omega, up to this point, we're 4 episodes in, has she experienced any type of loss? And in my opinion, she hasn't. So she's going to have to experience that at some point. It's just, who's it going to be?
Yeah. That is something that could tear the group apart for sure. Before we start finishing up some things, I picked out a couple little Easter eggs I just wanted to shout out here in the episode that I got a chuckle out of. So the first one here is on the desk of the Solstin, there's the Lady Luck like cruiser design that Lando Calrissian has in like after Return of the Jedi. I thought that was a nice touch, and I do believe that ship actually appears in one of the Clone Wars episodes with Cad Bane and whatnot. Another thing, I know this one doesn't get a lot of exposure, is the Vorpax from Star Wars Resistance, which are these like really weird like space cat thingies. The one's called like Buggles or something like that, and that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. Is the short-lived series Star Wars Resistance. But it is still nice to see that they're paying homage to the show, even though it's been off the air for a couple of years at this point. And one last thing I will say is there's this really cool use of something in Star Wars that we finally understand what the heck its purpose was. So there's a really quick shot. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but like in A New Hope, they're in a detention center and they're storming the place to get Leia out, and like Han and Chewie are like firing at these like metal things on like the ceilings and stuff. And I'm like, what are those things? And we actually see that they're actually cameras because they have the same looking one. And they're like, Tech has like hacked the system and he's like zooming and he's like, I found Omega. And I was like, yes, we're finally like acknowledging things from 41 or 2 years ago that we know what the purpose is.
That's funny. Yeah. That's pretty funny. Yeah, so, no, I like. Yeah. I think I like the little Easter egg stuff. I really enjoy like the visuals of these episodes. Again, I like this animation format, and I think as we progress, I think we're going to get some things that will be very shocking. Because I do have one theory of someone else she might be reporting to as well. Huh. And I don't know if I want to share it right now. I'm just it's probably out there, but I don't know if it's credible. I'm just trying to think outside the box. So.
That's what we're here for. That's what the people like to hear, is just all this speculation and theories and whatnot, right? Well, I think it's about time to kind of wrap things up, give it a score out of 10 like we were doing on our old Mandalorian episode reviews. I'm going to start with Ben on this one. Final thoughts and score out of 10, man.
Well, I would say overall the episode was pretty good for the most part. It had some pretty good ups, as we said. Fennec Shand was great in the episode. I'm still loving Omega. She's still my favorite character for the show as a whole, because I'm liking to see where she's going as a character, but also, the creators' realizations of like, hey, we can't have her as a full-blown soldier just yet. So, she's still getting into trouble as a kid. She's literally, they just get done escaping the Empire in the last few episodes, and then you have her like asking them like, hey, can we go and explore like a planet? And they're like, wait, what? So like just seeing like, the realizations of like the creators like, hey, we still got to keep her realistic to her age demographic. So that's great. And then, as I said earlier, like seeing, the paying homage to like Attack the Clones, like the speeder chase, with our new version of Zam Wessel, pretty much. That's really cool. And then of course like the speculation of who Fennec Shand's reporting to, whether it be Boba or the Kaminoans or someone else. Like I think that's going to be a really big part of this series, is whoever she's reporting to, because again that could tie into the Kaminoans' plans they were talking about at the end of the last one. There's so many compounding stories that are going to just keep adding up, and then eventually they're going to all tie together by the end of this show. Mm-hmm. So we have that. And then, as I said earlier, as I said to start this, the only knock on this episode was, man, another ship crash landing. Like, if it wasn't for that, I would give this episode a much higher grade, but I would have to say, just to keep it objective, I would have to say I would give this episode a 7 out of 10.
That's fair. I'm gonna go a little bit higher than you on the score. I echo a lot of things you said, actually, Ben. So I like the fact that yes, Fennec Shand is getting introduced as a character that we wouldn't expect as a villain, that has a different angle on different things. There are interactions with Omega, the way she's introduced to her as this benevolent, loving mother-like figure, and then very quick to being one of the most violent people in Star Wars galaxy we've seen, taking out the Bad Batch super easily after we've seen what those guys are actually capable of. Really just adds to her overall power and her overall danger to the entire crew there. Of course, everything with the animation really shined more than any other time in this season so far. Having the chases throughout the galaxy, and then having a reason for this episode to exist. Whether or not it was the most compelling plot, I gotta dock some points because, yeah, we didn't really get that much character development. what we did get was a little bit more with Echo, which is something I've been craving for a while. But in the end of this episode, they have changed the ship's transponder. So that allows them to travel all throughout the galaxy without being tracked, essentially. So now we're going to see them moving more freely. What I like about this season is they're getting all this stuff out of the way first. They're not like letting this stuff linger into like the later half of the season, which we've seen with Star Wars Resistance or Star Wars Rebels. Sometimes they're like, all right, let's get the episodes of Omega, like, trying to go her own way before getting pulled back by Hunter. Let's see her getting her in trouble when she's wandering. Let's get all this stuff out of the way, and then we can get some like really great storytelling towards the end of the season. So with that being said, yeah.
I was going to say one more thing. So
yeah.
Sorry to interject onto you, but you just brought up the end of the season. That reminds me to throw in one very quick tidbit of news for this show. I'm sure both of you might have seen it, but did you see the Kiner brothers tweeted out earlier this week?
Oh yeah.
They just finished scoring the season finale for this show, and they said, they hadn't felt that much emotion in a show they've done. Like, so, what's that mean? Could it be high emotions like happy, or could it be potentially sad? Like, so that is one little tidbit of Star Wars news just to throw in there for the Bad Batch.
Yeah, that's something that we could take either way. It could be something. So, like, I've gotten burned so many times from just things people have said in the industry. The most recent one being with WandaVision, where the guy that plays Vision is like, oh, this is the best like person I've ever wanted to act with, and it ended up being himself. So I don't put a whole lot of stock into anything people say anymore after I got burned many times by things like that. But it is very interesting to look into that if you look into that further. But yeah, like I was saying, just overall, really like this episode. Had the best action sequence yet in this series. That thing was awesome. Really reminiscing about Attack of the Clones. But with that said, I will give it a 7.5 out of 10.
Okay. I think I'm going to be the jerk of this episode when it comes to reviewing it. Like I said, I wasn't really a big fan of this episode. I mean, look, the visuals are great, like always. The action was good. I can't complain about that. I just had issues with the story. I thought it was predictable. I mean, I could see the writing on the wall, what they were trying to do, which I guess you kind of need that sometimes in, long formatting of stories. But to me, I'll probably rank it a 5 out of 10. I'll be honest with you. I just had a lot of problems with the format of it and where it was going. And like I said, maybe I'm just being a little cynical right now about it because I just didn't really feel connected with it. So I'd go 5 out of 10. Again, the first 3 episodes, it's 7 or better without question. I mean, that premiere, 10 out of 10 without no doubt.
Whoa.
This one, I felt like episode 4 kind of dropped the ball.
Okay.
And maybe I'm being a little over the top about that when I say it. I'm hoping episode 5, 6, and 7 will gain some momentum again, and maybe we'll start getting more of the meat of the story. Because I think what I really fell in love with in the first 3 episodes, we were still dealing with the Empire. Like, we were still getting to know the Empire. Even though we are now in episode 4 as well, they kind of went away from that. I'm more interested in the clones and how the Empire is evolving. And maybe I missed that in this episode.
Yeah, and that's what's so good about having a character's perspective in the Empire Crosshair. I'm so happy they decided to go that route with the storytelling of having that perspective and not just being focused on the Bad Batch. We really have 3 storylines. We have the A storyline with the Bad Batch. We have the B storyline with Crosshair. And, well, we really have like a C storyline with the Kaminoans, if you really want to count that. So it's nice to see that complexity shining through. So, yeah, it's interesting because every week we don't know the title of this next episode until it's literally on Disney Plus, and sometimes it's not even on there immediately. Like if we watch the episode at like 3 a.m., I heard that it just says like episode 5. Like it doesn't even give you the title of the episode. They're being very secretive about this series, so it's kind of fun. It's like The Mandalorian. We don't know what we're getting until we actually watch it that week. But yeah, definitely tune in for next week. We're gonna keep this format going. We're gonna talk about the news. We're gonna talk about what we're doing recently with Star Wars, and we're gonna always break down whatever's the latest Star Wars episode. But guys, The first one is in the books. We didn't get cut off or disconnected. There was a little bit of a blip in the beginning of the episode with some echoing audio, but I was able to fix that. But somehow I think we pulled it out.
Let's get it. Let's get it.
There we go. Episode 1 in the books of many, many episodes to go.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun hanging out with you guys, especially in the beginning, just chatting about what really drew us into Star Wars, what keeps us passionate about the franchise. And for those of you that are listening after the fact, we are recording this live every Friday around about 9 o'clock Eastern time. So if you would like to join us in our chat, which we had a very active chat tonight, so that was really cool. Shout out to everybody that was in the chat, from Chris Weber to Love is Pain to Aesthetic Studio Lofi. All those guys in the chat there, you made it more active. It was a good time. So if you guys want to be part of the show, you can do that just going to youtube.com /Starrapter, and that's where we will host the live recordings. And then for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can go and subscribe to this podcast on whatever podcast platform you prefer. We are on Spotify, Google Podcasts, we are on Amazon Music, Stitcher, basically all of the above. So make sure you go there. And we also have a website, outerrimtransmission.podbean.com. That's where you'll find all of the episodes there. You can find me on Twitter at Starrapter. You can also find me on Facebook as well. And I record my videos weekly with different kind of things I've been putting up. Like I said, that fiction Star Wars collection on there as well. And I've been doing movie reviews. I've seen Saul over the weekend, and I'm looking forward to seeing The Army of the Dead that's coming out on Netflix. So you guys can look forward to that review coming out sometime next week. And I'll turn it over to Ben. Where can the people follow you?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at RealBenMaynard. And I'm always talking movies and fitness and sports. And so pretty much my main topics I'm discussing.
Sweet, man. Very good. Very good. And Milton?
You guys can find me on Twitter at MiltonWeber7. That's Milton Weber, the number 7. Or find me on Facebook at Milton Weber. Guys, seriously, subscribe to the podcast. Subscribe to Chris's channel. You know, there's so much dope content he puts out each week, so check it out. Hey, man, this is a place where we can be positive, be critical, but also, you know what, doing it in a way that's respectful and just talk to Star Wars and talk pop culture. So hope you guys come back.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. So until next week, for Ben, for Milton, we are out of here. And that was Outer Rim Transmission number 8. And we'll see you next week for number 9. Have a good night, everybody.